electric. Before my stuff was more floral. You can go into cutting corn stalks, you can cut airplanes. I've seen some guys that he goes through and cuts little airplanes out on pieces. I think it was in Clay Times or Ceramics Monthly or something like that. And then put the slip over it. And so it's not anything, again, not anything new. It's been done before. It's been done by a plethora of people. So for me, it was just like a way to speed things up. So again, I don't have to spend 16 hours carving on a piece and have to charge $400 for a little jar, $500 or $600 or $700 for a jar to be big. Because I mean, once you start doing that, then it gets a little bit harder to survive selling pots. And so right now I'm kind of limited with the papers that I have because I only have what I brought. And so sometimes that is a good thing. Other times it's a bad thing because you just have to play around with different styles and shapes and different things to get it to do what you want it to do. So right now I'm kind of at a toss-up. I'm not exactly sure which one I want to use. And so again, this is where it gets like, how much do you want to spend time doing this?
So you talked about, it sounded like you had real geometry issues.
I wouldn't say I don't have geometry issues. It takes a long time.
Right.
Like the big one that's in there that has like the diamondback kind of design on it. That one took me about 6 hours to do the paper and pulling them away and put the slip on because like what I did on that one is I took the measurement around the neck and then basically had 4-inch sections of 4 inches all the way down. So I have to take that circumference for where the points would be on those diamonds and then something like this. So if I had to shape something like this, right, if the circumference was, I don't remember what they were, maybe it was 24 inches. So I would basically find something that I could divide it by and then continue that sort of same measurement all the way through. So the next one I'd measure down, divide that by 4, and so I'd have 4 inches by whatever amount of inches the width was. So you can only go so far, so you have to do this row, and then once you get that row so it fits perfectly, then you go down to the next row, and once you get that row to fit perfectly, then you go down to the next row. So I was using fishing line, and what I would do is I just take a piece of fishing line, roll it around the whole piece, put that down on a tape measure, divide that by 4. So that was kind of the easiest way because a ruler doesn't really bend around a pot very well. And so that was kind of the easiest way to figure out that measurement. But again, it still takes time because if you mess up on your measurement, then you have to go back to the drawing board and cut 4 more pieces that are either a little bigger or a little smaller, so on and so forth. And so it can get very tedious. But for some reason, I enjoy it. I'm not quite sure. I might just be a little insane, but I'm still cool with that. So I'm thinking I might do. So if you're not quite sure what you want to do yet, if you take a piece of paper, just douse the tip. And you can kind of get an idea of what's going to happen when you put all these pieces on there. So you can kind of be like, oh, I don't quite like that. It's too da-da, or it's too this, or too that. Like I don't like that. It's too, like the pieces are too wide. I prefer, like, some of my favorite pieces were the ones with the long, narrow strips of paper. I thought those were, it made it much more dynamic, I thought. I had one that I actually broke in the firing, and it had, instead of the pieces being 1 inch thick, they were like 3 inches thick, and then tapered down to a point. And it just didn't have that same sort of really wow effect, so to speak. And so by just playing around with it and working through those different ideas, it started coming to like where that strip just got really long. So you just kind of play around. I mean, that's essentially what it is. It's all play. That's why I probably like it as much as I do. I'm going to try this on this guy. When I get completely stuck, that is usually when I go to the peony design, which is, I brought some of those in. Where did I put them? Oh, right here. So that's where this kind of shape came in. So more floral, because it's much easier to kind of just go around the piece in whatever sort of pattern you want. Whereas this tends to be a little bit more kind of monotonous, strenuous, everything else. I think I'm going to go with this one. So basically what I do is I just douse the whole piece of paper in water. Alright, maybe I will want a different banding wheel. So I can basically adhere that to the whole side of the piece so it will actually stay and be stuck on there. The one thing you have to worry about is when you guys all taken watercolor a little bit. Like when you take the paper and you soak it and then you tape it down to a board, it absorbs that water, stretches, and then as soon as it dries out, it shrinks down really well. Actually, you know what? We can just do it on the wheel itself.
I don't know if this turns. This one
No,
doesn't.
maybe not. Just kidding.
That's hammer curl.
Oh, that's much better. So since I haven't taken a full measurement as far as what for the geometry on this thing, the pieces might not line up properly, even. So you just start on the sides and then work to the next area and work to the next area. So you're basically breaking it down into sort of quadrants. And I know nobody else will ever really know that this is actually a little bit this way, but it's something that I'm a little OCD about. But I'm not going to worry about it on this one. And I actually like the way that, I was thinking about doing the peony on this one, and I'm like, I don't like the way the little flower petals will look with a bunny skull on top. I think with the lines, it's just one of those things that just makes it even more dynamic because you have all this sort of rigid, non-objective stuff instead of this sort of flowery stuff on it. So, I mean, it just depends on the piece. And I get to the point where, like when I'm cutting papers out, I will start to use the excess paper, so it's not necessarily any shape whatsoever, so it starts to become kind of like a Rorschach. So you can basically take, like say, like you can see kind of the edges of this where it was kind of cut out. I'll start using those bits and pieces of paper as like something else. So it can become something more where I just play with shape until it becomes something that I see. Even though most people don't see what I see, it's just one of those things that I just roll with. Because it's not necessarily about what everybody else wants to see, it's about what I want to see on there. So I'm a little bit selfish in that respect. Exactly. So the cool thing about this paper is that when I'm putting these things on, as long as you don't put them down or seal them down, you can actually kind of slide them around. I'll show you on this next one. So you can kind of put it on there and you can slide it around or up or down. So it's just learning kind of where and how that paper is going to react, so that you can get it so that it has that itty bitty little point right at that line, versus it being up too high.
Do you get any bleeding or anything?
I do get a little bit of bleeding, and I'll actually let me put this last one on and I'll show you. And this is where you actually have to be a little bit careful, because what will happen is that water seals it down, and then as that paper dries out, sometimes it will release a little bit. And so, like right here, there's just a little like almost looks like a little air bubble. It's really, really small, but it's enough to let some of that slip seep in too. So if you just take your finger, douse your finger a little bit, kind of press that down, it'll seal it back down. The brush actually works really well too, because it'll actually get some water up and underneath. Like that. And then the other thing is you want to let this paper dry out a bit before you go in and put your slip on, because since there's still some water underneath it, if you don't let it dry out completely, it'll actually just kind of slide around on you. So you'll have this really nice design on there, and then you go to put the slip on and it'll just like whoosh, slide everything to the left or right, or make your life a little bit tricky.
This takes some time.
Yes. Sometimes too much time. And it gets even worse when you spend all this time and then you get it on there and you're like, God, crap, that looks like beep. So, and I mean, I don't ever really sit down with a bending wheel and then draw a line around to get it to line up just perfect. I don't want it to be that pristine and perfect. Because I still want it to be a handmade object and look a little bit handmade. And if you get too refined, it becomes to the point where it's like a little too monotonous. In my unprofessional opinion. And you'll notice on this next one that I just put on that it's not quite lined up perfect. I mean, if I was working on it and spending the full amount of time to actually go through, I would have every one of those, like, I'd make sure that there was that little line between each of those strips. So,
6 hours a day.
this one won't take me 6. It's more, it depends on how geometric it is. Like the Diamondback one, for example. That one took a long time. The other one, I kind of likened it up unto Alice in Wonderland, the one where it had the little thin strips and then it had like these little, looked like heads with little fluffy things on the top. I kind of thought that was looked kind of like Alice in Wonderland, where the Queen of Hearts army of cards. Don't know where that came from. It just kind of came, and I'm like, all right, I'm cool with it. But those ones actually don't take too long because I only have to measure twice. So I just measure the top, and then measure how far down I want to go, and then measure the next one and how far was left. So it's more when you're getting into the ones where it's like, however many lines you have to measure. And then you also have to think about kind of which slips you're going to put on first, and whether or not they're compatible. Because some slips do not work well with others, and so you have to kind of think about how that's going to react and how it's going to be a little bit different. Like, I think both these slips are the same, right? So they'll go on really, really quite easily. Oh well, we're gonna run with that.
You want to stir it?
No, it's work, all right. So once I get that to that point, like anywhere where there's paper left behind, like down here, I want to come down and get rid of those little pieces. because otherwise you'll actually have those little slip lines that'll go all the way down. Sometimes they tear, sometimes they don't. Reasons are tearing, alright.
Is that just regular paper, copy paper?
Newsprint.
Oh, newsprint.
Yep. Newsprint actually, newsprint is good and bad. Because have you guys ever torn newsprint for like paper mache? Where if you tear one way, it tears in long strips. If you tear the other way, that's still in the paper. So if you cut one way and you're going to pull it off, you get about a little bit down and then it'll tear the other way. And so it'll kind of drive you nuts. But copy paper works really well too. You don't want anything too heavy. The heavier your paper, the harder it is going to wrap around some. So you'll have more places where it will kind of seep in behind. So this is just a big wide brush, so I can cover a lot of surface. Probably the best brush for this. So what I'm going to do is I'm basically just going to go around once, because I don't want to put too much water on there, otherwise it will make that paper move around again. So I'll put like a quick first coat on to kind of seal everything down. And if you get slipped somewhere where you don't want it, it's not a big deal. You can just go in and scrape it away with like a knife or something that just will hold an edge a little bit. And once I'm actually done, I'll, like the line right here where it's a little bit loose, I'll actually go in and trim that back on the wheel again, just to get it so it has that same crispness as the rest of the piece. What's that?
Do it till it's dry and sand it off?
No, I would actually do it when it's still a little bit wet.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't actually thought about sanding it off. It may actually work better. Cause then I'm not sure. I'll have to try it. Alright, we're gonna do this instead. Alright, so once that's done, you want to let it set up a little bit. If you pull it off when it's still really wet, it'll actually seep and move into the different areas. Whereas if you let it get back to kind of a leather hard and then pull it off, it'll be a little bit easier. Or you'll have that really, really crisp, clean line. So just depending on how long you wait makes a difference. But for all intents and purposes, we'll go ahead and pull it off. And then you want to kind of keep track of which ones you put on first and which ones you put on last. Because some of them will have overlap, some of them will, so if papers are overlapping one, if you peel the other one first, it'll flip back down against the piece and actually stick to, or cause some of those lines to kind of get a little bit, not quite so crisp. And you can see kind of down at the bottom where it's, like a lot of this is bubbles, but some of that's just slip to kind of seep through. And so once it dries up a little bit, you can go back and make adjustments. Or you might not want it to be a perfectly crisp line. So if you don't want that, then come in a little bit earlier and do it a little bit earlier. This piece is actually still a little bit wet. It's not quite leather hard yet. That will also affect it because the water won't absorb in and seal that paper. The other really cool thing about this is you can put as many layers on as you want. Like say you had a white layer, like say I left all those papers on there, let it stiffen back up. I can take another layer of papers, so I could actually take like the scheme and go over the top of the white and then put a black over the top of that. So you can actually get like 3 and 4 and 5 and however many colors you want to put on there. So it can be really, really quite cool. The most layers I've ever put on a piece is about 3. I think what I put on there. So that would be it for now. And then, yeah, that doesn't look very good, does it? So once this sets back up a little bit, I'll probably come in and got like a little diamond shape. I'll probably come in and put a little row of diamonds around that center part to kind of cover up some of the stuff that's going on. But you can play around with these things as much as you want. Timing is very, very important though, so just be cautious of that. If you're going to play around with it, you want it kind of a dry leather hard, not quite soft leather hard. It will make a bit of a difference. So since that one's kind of more experimentation, what we'll do is we'll get this other guy over here, and we'll do one with the peony on it, and then maybe let that dry up a little bit, and maybe we'll put another black layer on it. Just guide you guys real quick. I'll just reach over and grab this guy.
You want that other banding?
No, I'll just put it on the paper like that one. So since I already had a bunch of these cut out, and you, when you're cutting them out, you'll start to learn that you can cut about, I usually cut about 8 pieces at a time. So I can get, if I had to cut every one single individual piece, I would be very, very angry most of the time. So if I can get 8 pieces